it's Jen Varela from Sugar Night Night, and I'm excited today because we get to have Dr. Kendra Flores on live today. And we're going to talk about raising anti-racist children and just have a conversation about that. I'm beyond honored to have Dr. Kendra on with me, and while we're waiting for her to join, I'm going to just do a proper introduction. So just so honored to have Dr. Kendra. Oh, here she is already. So I am going to add her. She's coming. So Dr. Kendra Flores has, oh, there she is. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited about this morning. So thank you for being here. And on the lives, we can see just the top of your eyes. Maybe drop it down just a little sketch so we can see more of your face. That'd be awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
just my eyes you can see? Can you
Now
see
it's much better. Now I can see your whole face. That's great.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta
So
shift the camera.
yeah, I know
Yeah.
these lives are a learning curve still for me.
Oh,
So
yeah. So, okay. Is that better? Can you see
yeah,
my
now we
face
can see
now?
your face. Yeah,
Okay.
which is nice. So how about I do the proper introduction? So I would love to read your bio, if that's all right with you. If I start with that. Yeah?
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
All right. All right. So Dr. Kendra Flores has an extensive repertoire of knowledge and experiences. She's a published author, professor of social work at California Baptist University, a researcher in social and behavior science. She's the president of Postpartum Support International California State Chapter and co-chairs the Inland Empire Maternal Mental Health Collaborative. She spent 10 years working as a medical social worker where she lived with children suffering from trauma as a result of child abuse. And she founded the Janet Don't Cry Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing education support and resources on global health needs. And I met Dr. Kendra because we're both involved and passionate about the Postpartum Support International California chapter. And leading up to this conversation that we were going to have, I attended the webinar you were a part of last week on raising anti-racist children. And that was just an amazing presentation of just really taking a look at, you know, our biases, our perspectives. And my favorite quote that you shared was, when a child truly loves who they are, they want everyone else to have the same feelings. And I just thought there was so much wisdom in that. And so thank you for joining me in this crazy adventure of listening and learning that I'm doing. I just really want to keep the conversation going. And I want to be a good steward with the opportunity that I have with the audience of young parents. And wouldn't it be great if this could be a shift that we have in our culture? And it's going to start with families, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's going to start in the homes for sure.
Yeah.
We have to raise a generation of kids that don't hate each other.
Imagine that. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, so maybe we could just start with a little bit of like what brought you into the field of maternal mental health and social justice, and how did you get here? Where did this all start for you?
You know, it all started, I believe, in 2016 when I really and truly started to get a lot of depression during pregnancy. I don't know what was going on that year, but I really was not familiar at all with perinatal mental health. And so in the hospital, we usually get consultation whenever there's a mom that came in or any patient that had mental health issues or concerns, they would consult a social worker. And it just started to become more common in like the women's health areas. And so I really wanted to learn more. At the same time, I was enrolled in a doctoral program. And so they were, my professors or my chair for my research, encouraged me to do a research on something that I really didn't know anything about. And so I chose perinatal mental health.
Okay.
In particular, I chose to look at the postpartum depression really in depth. And so my research was around postpartum depression and Black women. And as I was doing my research, I began to learn more and more about the disparities in health. I learned more and more about the racism that Black women experience during their, medical healthcare checkups and things like that. And it just became really concerning for me once I started learning that Black women were 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth or from a childbirth complication. And
Which I
that,
have to say, oh, before you go even further, more than that, I've been, involved with locally postpartum support, for several years, and honestly, I didn't realize the stats on
Mhm.
that until this year, which I'm actually quite astonished and embarrassed that I was not aware. And so, can you say that one more time? Because I think it's a big number to take in. Because I think a lot of people are just not aware of what's happening. So, can you say it one more
Yeah,
time?
yeah, and it's evidence-based research, that. So it's not anything that we're just making up. I mean, when
Mm-hmm.
you look at the numbers of childbirth maternal mortality, you see clearly that there is a significant disparity because Black women are definitely 3 to 4 times more likely to die when compared to any other race. So that's definitely significant. Another issue is that the Black infants are 3 times more likely to die within that first year of life when compared to any
Mm-hmm.
other race. So it's definitely, an important for me as a Black woman to bring
Mm-hmm.
some light to this and to really
Mm-hmm.
and truly just highlight the reasons why we need to really and truly reform the medical or maternal health
Mm-hmm.
practices for Black women, because why are we, the ones that are more likely to die, when childbirth is such, a natural, it should be a natural,
Mm-hmm.
thing that we go
Mm-hmm.
through, and not all women are dying while giving birth. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, or from a
Wow.
childbirth complication.
Yeah. And I think that just the being aware that we need changes in our healthcare system too, right?
Yeah, yeah, or,
To be able to, and I think if we aren't having these conversations, then we're not aware, then we can't help be an advocate to help
yeah.
make those changes happen,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
I think it's definitely about education. We really need
mhm,
to educate on how to be um, different and how to be better when it comes to working with women of color, because
mhm,
I just know that there's a lot of biases when it comes to Black women. I mean, me
mhm,
personally, I experienced biases while I was pregnant.
mhm,
The assumption was made that I was on Medi-Cal, which is the state,
mhm,
insurance, which is nothing wrong with being on that, but you only assume that I was receiving state
mhm,
insurance because of the color of my skin, right? And
mhm,
so you categorize me in a category
mhm,
that I really wasn't a part of, and you
mhm,
had nothing to go off of but what I look like, and when you face things like that,
mhm,
when the face change when you're walking up to the clerk that was so nice to the previous white person, and here you come as a Black woman with two
mhm,
of your children by
mhm,
your side holding their hands and they're Black, the assumption is just different. And
mhm,
that experience for Black women really and truly a lot of the times creates more of a pattern of mistrust with the medical
mhm,
system. There's people that are biased against us, and there's people that give us lesser care because we're Black. And I don't know why that is,
mhm,
but it is there. And it's unfortunate because a lot of Black women die because of the nonchalant kind of attitude that some medical professions have when
mhm,
working with Black mothers. And so
mhm,
the shift has to come because it's not okay
mhm,
that we are dying.
mhm. Yeah. And that that really brings up the whole concept of cultural humility, right? As far as like even from the receptionist at the desk, right?
Mhm.
How
Yeah.
she approaches and sees and how her eyes are open.
Mhm.
One of my first jobs as I was a receptionist at a law school. And I really I really enjoyed being the greeter, everyone coming in the door and get to say hello and all that stuff. And I I do think that it's not always going to be the big things that make the change, but it's going to be the change in heart, right? That
Yeah.
we have, and just like, am I choosing to do this, realizing that my just trying to be kind and empathetic isn't enough anymore for me. And
Mhm.
so I'm stepping out into these conversations that, you know, are revealing my own privilege, in the sense that it's a privilege that these are uncomfortable,
Yeah.
that these
Yeah.
conversations are uncomfortable as part of my privilege, right?
Yeah.
Because I just, you know, just, oh, stay in my lane, teach my children. But actually it can't just be that anymore.
Yeah.
We have to keep having these conversations. And so it's not just going to be that the doctor who's going to make this all better, but it's even, you know, just us in whatever role we're in,
Yeah.
to
From the
making sure.
moment, yeah, exactly. From the moment a Black woman walks in the door, she should be treated
Hmm.
equally across the board,
Equally,
every
always.
single aspect of her medical
Hmm.
appointment. And I don't see
Hmm.
that happening. And I think that's a big issue.
Hmm.
So when
Yeah.
we say cultural humility, when we say
Hmm.
implicit bias, when we say all of those training, it's not only for doctors and nurses, it's for the
Hmm.
entire hospital staff.
Hmm.
Everyone needs to get training in how to practice
Hmm.
cultural humility and how to be
Hmm.
kind and how
Hmm.
to develop this culture where a Black woman doesn't feel like
Hmm.
she is being negatively treated, like she
Hmm.
feels less than or inferior to going into
Hmm.
a hospital setting. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
it shouldn't be that feeling. And I think that administration, organizations really and truly need to figure out ways that they can, you know, implement
Hmm.
cultural humility practices within their settings. It's going to take a
Hmm.
lot because generations and generations of systemic racism, and
Hmm.
the leaders, they don't really know either what is cultural humility to a lot of people. So
Hmm.
it's going to take, this is why we have to start from the very beginning. We have
Hmm.
to start teaching our future generation
Yeah.
how to have cultural humility.
Yeah.
We
So
can
how
teach
do we
it.
do that? Yeah.
you
So
know
how do we do that
I
with our kids?
it starts with little things. For me, I talk to my children about other people. I encourage them to love who they are, and
Hmm.
I also encourage them to understand that the feeling that you have towards you and loving you, everyone
Hmm.
needs to have that same feeling inside. They
Hmm.
need to be
Hmm.
joyful, they need to be happy
Hmm.
about who they are. And
Hmm.
so you guys have everything. You have a lot of love from your parents.
Hmm.
So all the other kids out there and everyone out there wants to have that same feeling. And it's important for
Hmm.
us to encourage that wherever
Hmm.
we are, right?
Hmm.
Encourage kindness, encourage
Hmm.
loving each other. From the
Hmm.
moment we're very little, nobody is born hating. I mean, if you put a bunch of
Hmm.
babies in a room, they're going to
Hmm.
just naturally gravitate to each other,
Hmm.
right? Because that's
Hmm.
just a natural thing. And
Yeah.
so the division and the divisiveness begins to come in as kids grow older, and then they
Hmm.
start to be socially conditioned based on biases, based on
Hmm.
the stereotypes that we as parents believe about other races. And so we really and truly have to change that dynamic. And it takes little things, like if you are buying toys, buy culturally diverse toys as well, and
Hmm.
incorporate that within your home.
Hmm.
One of the things that we do is, like, we have Mexican night where we have Mexican food, and everything is related to the Mexican culture. Or if we want to
Cool.
have Thai,
Uh-huh.
okay, then we incorporate Thai into what we're doing for that night. And I think just basic things
That's
that
cool.
could teach children how to have cultural humility and how to
Hmm.
say, hey, I have my own culture, and
Hmm.
my friend who is Mexican have their own culture as well. And I will
Hmm.
never understand what it is to be Mexican, but I
Hmm.
kind of have some understanding of the
Hmm.
types of food they like and the type of
Hmm.
people they might be, because
Hmm.
what my parents taught me about the Mexican culture.
Hmm.
It's going to your school, and if you only see curriculum that are not diverse, is really and truly saying, hey, how come you guys only are only doing like European related curriculum? What about curriculums that are more diverse? It takes that. For me, I really and truly, when I get an assignment or a project for my children, I look at it and I say, well, okay, how can I make this relatable to my kids? Because then that's going to teach the fellow students in the classroom about Black history, or about, African American or Afro-Caribbean, or whatever the case may be. So I try to bring that culture into the classroom for other people to see. And I think that's definitely important. We have to try to do that. When we see there's a lack of inclusion and diversity, we speak up about it and say, hey, what's going on here? Hold people accountable and say, it's important for us to really be a representation of the community that we serve. The community is diverse. California, for instance, is very diverse. So 9 times out of 10, your organization is serving people of color, right? They're serving Black, Indigenous people of color. And so it's important for the administration to be diverse, because how can you give a voice to a community if you're not from that community? It's very difficult to do that. And I really see that. You can't speak for the Black race and the Black culture if everyone in your administration is white. You just can't. It's not okay. And you're making decisions for populations that you serve, but you know nothing about. You don't have a voice from the community. So that's when we talk about cultural humility. That's really and truly what we mean, is inclusion of all voices that you are serving in your community. And that includes Black, Indigenous people of color.
Yeah. And I really like how you started like where we start, which is when our kids feel loved and love who they are, then they want to have others have that same thing, right?
And that's just natural. That's just natural.
And that doesn't mean you have to go make a huge political statement. It means, be mindful, right? And I can see even sort of interesting how having more than one child, I get to go, okay, well, I get a little bit of a do-over on that one because, right, the first child, right? And I can really see a distinction in my 2 children to the extent of self-love. And I think, I was maybe a little hard on my oldest at the beginning. Thankfully, they're really close in age, so that didn't last long. But I can see that. And my husband is Latinx, and he's from Mexico City originally. And so my daughter and I had this really interesting conversation after last Thursday's webinar. And we were talking about how even now it's not Latina always or Latino, it's Latinx, and why is that? And then even just talking about like, well, how do you identify yourself, Molly? Like, how do you see yourself? Because I'm clearly very white, and my husband is clearly, minority, and she's that blend, right? Especially, and she's like, no, I definitely see myself as Latinx, or Latina, or and I have never had that conversation with her before, and even that's my bias, right? Because I just go, well, she's my daughter, so she's like me.
Oh, yes.
Right? And
it's so important.
Oh my gosh. And I'm like, again, she's 15. And like, you would think I would have been having this conversation a long time ago, And
one of the things that I really do with my children is I teach them to love themselves, because my kids they come, Mom, I want my hair to be straight like my friend Emily, or like my friend, Lily, or whoever. They go to a predominantly Hispanic school. It's predominantly Mexicans at the school that they attend. We live in Fontana, California. And I will tell you that Fontana is like 70% Hispanic. So all the schools are pretty much, predominantly Hispanic. And so they do go to a private school. And they come home sometimes and they're questioning themselves, like, why do I look like this? Why can't I wear my hair like my friend Emma? Or why can't I wear my hair like my friend, you know, Elizabeth or Isabel, or whatever the case may be? And I really try to explain to them that, hey, your hair is different because your mommy and daddy is different, and that's okay. That is okay. I want you to love who you are. Your hair is, you know, it's really curly. Look at this. Not a lot of people can pull a curl and then it curls back up, you know. And I show them the beauty in who they are. And so my children, they are really, I pride myself in the fact that they're really growing up to love who they are, because I encourage that. I make it a priority to highlight their Blackness, because this is who you are. You are, you're going to grow up, you're a Black little girl, and you're going to grow into a Black woman, right? You can't change that. And so I am not going to encourage you to self-identify as anything other than who you are, a Black woman. And so that's you know, that's what I have to do, because I want my kids to grow up and be very confident in who they are. And sometimes as parents, we really want to make our kids fit in, but you can definitely encourage them to fit in being who they are.
They are.
You know, and not try to fit in by being somebody else or close to someone else. And so for me, making sure that they love being who they are as Black girls and Black boy is important. And so I really encourage that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I liked how you talked about getting them to be a little more open and aware. And so when you have like a dinner and you're going to go Thai, then you might actually play Thai music and look at that culture a little bit. I'm going to say I'm really grateful that my kids early on like sushi, because I love sushi, and maybe that's another privileged thing. But you know, it's kind of a crazy concept, eating fish that's not been cooked, right? And so I know with food, I have definitely from the beginning really tried to make it interesting and fun, but I've always looked at it like about the food. And I haven't ever really gone, okay, hey, let's pull out our phones and let's Google, like, you know, because they have their phones. Like my kids are teenagers, right? So we could do that, and I think I'm gonna try that next time that we have a different type of food. I'm just gonna say, hey, let's like look up interesting facts about this culture and whatever, and
you can make every little thing that you do in your home, you can make it an educational moment. You know, the food you eat, you can make it an educational moment. The toys that you buy, make it an educational moment. You know, why, you know, tell them a little bit about the toy and who made it, and, you know, what company it from, or whatever the case may be. You know, make it an educational moment about culture. And I think that's how, because cultural humility is going to be ongoing. It's not something that you do today and stop. Like this is an everyday practice. It's an everyday thing. And so it's where organizations, they're going to have to continuously train on how employees need to practice cultural humility. You don't just do one training and you're now an expert in cultural humility. It doesn't work that way. Our generation's forever changing, you know, and so we got to also change with the times.
Yeah. And so I think it does start with being aware of our own privilege and bias, right? To be able to go, oh gosh, I realize I haven't even been aware of this. And then giving the kids, giving them the love that they need, so then they can see how you model, how you honor those around you that are not the same as you.
Yeah.
And then if you're in a position of leadership or influence, then that's why I'm here, because we got to be a good steward with that. And
we have to be proactive. I mean, we're the adults, and so what our kids see us do, they're going to do. And that's why when I talk about the social learning theory, if they learn kindness and love, and they learn about others and how to accept other people for who they are, you know, in a kind way instead of a negative way, then they'll grow up to practice that. And we got to teach them that as parents, because the world is not going to teach them,
Yeah.
because the
Right.
world is biased. So,
Right.
you
So it's up to
know,
us. And I loved your idea too of being an advocate in the school. So most of my parents I work with, obviously, they're not obviously, but their children are going to be more in a preschool than in a elementary school. And I think, it would take a little courage to go up to that preschool teacher and say, "Hey, have you seen this new book? It's the anti-racist baby book, and maybe we could add this to the library of of the what the kids are reading." Like. But I think being an advocate where we can, we all have places where we have influence and we have a voice, and I do see that. I really appreciate you putting that on the table because I think sometimes we just go along with the system because we don't want to make waves and we don't want our kids to get tagged as that's the mom who's the
oh yeah.
tricky one. But I have to say, I have,
Well, I'll just
and
say that I've probably
yeah,
been tagged, but I'm okay with being tagged
you're
because
okay with being tagged.
my kids, they
Yeah,
need to learn about themselves, and I want the
yeah,
school to represent the diversity that they have at the
yeah,
school. It might be just one Black kid, but that one
hmm
Black kid needs to have some type of representation,
absolutely. Yeah,
So, I mean, I
absolutely.
really, and it's all about advocating. And,
Yeah.
I was recently asked this past year, which it kind of bums out because I am actually the PTA president. So, I became the president for this school year for the, parent teacher.
Oh, and here
And
we
so
are.
now, because of COVID, I'm
Oh,
like, oh, well,
oh.
I started going to all the meetings last fall, and we were going, and,
Hmm.
I was like doing some of the meetings and things like that. And it was really,
Hmm.
an exciting journey to be a part of
Yeah.
my children's school and represent,
Yeah.
the parents. So
Hmm.
it was really nice to be able to do that. And even,
Hmm.
be involved.
Yeah.
I encourage being involved. Career day.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, go to career
Hmm.
day. I went for the first time last year, and it was really nice to go. And, my kids
Hmm.
they looked at me and they were just so proud that mommy was there in front of their class just
Oh,
talking about, what she does and her
that's
work.
great. Hmm.
So, the kids, they got to see a Black woman in front of their class. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's a doctor, that's an author. And so they
Hmm.
probably, uh, are not being taught that in the home.
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
probably being taught that, oh, Black women are like,
Hmm.
baby mamas, or
Hmm.
they're not educated, because some parents are
Hmm.
biased and that's what they believe about Black women. But when you're
Hmm.
out there in the community, and when
Hmm.
they're seeing, oh wow, your mom wrote a book, and your
Hmm.
mom, so
Hmm.
it's all about that too. It's like,
Hmm.
going into
And
the
where can we
community.
elevate,
Hmm.
right? Where
Yeah,
can we
yeah.
elevate?
Hmm.
And when there's a position that needs to be filled in leadership,
Hmm.
and there's somebody who's qualified that is
Yeah,
maybe of the BIPOC group, then let's do it.
yeah.
Let's have you guys lead because I have so much to learn from you, Dr. Kendra, and I really mean that sincerely. And I love that we get to work together on something we share passionate about. But I really have to just tell you is I am very honored to get to be under your leadership, um, and so I'm excited about all that is going to come in the worlds that you and I get to travel in together. And I just so appreciate your passion and heart to bring this to the table with me.
Yeah,
Um, and just trying to pick these small things that parents, when you have little kids, it's overwhelming, right? I mean,
it is.
obviously I'm working with sleep deprived children or sleep deprived parents. And so, it may not be your season to go and, join in administration, right? But it might be your season to be the advocate and in the system that you're in. And I
Yeah.
always say feather the nest you're in, right? So it's always easier to when you've got that relationship with someone to then when you approach them with, hey, could we consider, this or adding that, then there's relationship there. So I think everything starts with relationship, but it also means too that sometimes you have to have these uncomfortable conversations and be willing to step outside your comfort zone. And I think that's one of the things that I'm realizing is,
Hmm.
I really enjoy making people feel comfortable. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah,
And so it's trying to figure out how to do it authentically and that
yeah.
represents who I am. I'm not going to change who I am to become an advocate. I will be an advocate because I am being Jen and being,
Mhm.
in relationship, but not being afraid to speak up and keep the conversation going. And so I just thank you so much for doing this with me, and taking this time. And you have this great poem. I think it would be the coolest thing to end with. Do you mind stating that poem? It's so cool.
Oh yeah, let me pull it up then because
It's you.
yeah. The
Yeah, I
you
think
me
it's
us. Yeah,
you,
yeah,
me,
okay.
us. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just kind of created this poem for my kids, and it's just really simple because I feel like, it's just teaching them about kindness, right? The
Mm-hmm,
poem is called You, Me, Us, and it
mm-hmm,
says, your difference is what makes you you. My difference is what makes me me.
mm-hmm.
Together, our difference makes us
That's
us.
us. I love
Yeah,
that. I love that.
yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for the time today. And I hope that this has been encouraging to those that do watch it. And we'll keep this conversation going. So
Yeah, for
thank you for
sure. Let's keep
coming.
it going.
It's a real
Oh,
honor.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate coming on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all
Okay.
good. All
Bye.
right. Well,
Have
have
a
a
good day.
great day.
You too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.